Welcome in, everyone, to the Batfoot Podcast. My name is Damien here with Matt and David, and today we are going to be bringing you the 2023 World Series recap, where we saw the Texas Rangers beat the Houston Astros, the Arizona Diamondbacks in 5 games. But before we get to that, let's jump to Matt. How you doing this week? We missed you. We missed you last episode.
Yeah, I've been out of town a lot this October. Just been at the beach twice and had some just a lot of time out. But it's been a rough week. I was actually sick part of the week. I had a stomach bug and for a couple days had to miss work and was not feeling great and still kind of weak from it. And but I'm feeling better today and I ready to get rolling with the recap. I was able to watch all the World Series games and it was a pretty good World Series, I guess. I mean, there were a couple really classic games in it, and then there was some games that were not so good. But definitely congrats to the Texas Rangers, and ready to get into it. How's it been going, David?
It's been going all right, a little busy this week, but overall, just at this point, I'm feeling that off-season optimism, right? All the transactions are starting to come in, the mystery of a new season approaching after the finality of the last season. So I've got that going for me for now. But yeah, congrats to the Texas Rangers for sure. Um, a team that we've talked about a lot this season, and a team that I felt, you know, kind of deserved the World Series title kind of from the get go. From a spent a lot of money over the last two off seasons and has really set themselves up nicely for this season, at least next season as well with some of these contracts. But Damian, how are you doing before we really get into this World Series?
I'm doing good. I'm just excited that we're ready for postseason time or postseason off season time. I am all over the place today. I'm ready for off season time. It's my favorite part of the year, so we're gonna can't wait for next week when we do the free agency predictions. But the World Series was I didn't get to watch every single game. I wish I could have, but there was some exciting moments in it. I was obviously rooting hard for the Rangers since they have like half their roster as former Dodgers, I think. Um, so that was really fun, and just overall, I think it was, I don't know if you could say kind of refreshing, but like two teams that hadn't won in a really long time. The Rangers having never won a World Series. This was what 2001 was the
Yep.
last time they won. So it was really kind of a refreshing one. I know the ratings were down a lot, but I still enjoyed it a lot. I think if you were a fan of really fun baseball, this was a really good series. I think the name value probably hurt it, but um, overall, it was a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and just start breaking down game by game, and then we'll kind of do the overview of it. But game one, you had Nathan Eovaldi versus Zach Gallen. We figured it was going to be a pitcher's duel there, and the Rangers jumped on Zach Gallen really early in the first inning. Got a walk from Corey Seager, a double by Evan Carter to take a 1-0 lead, and then Adolis Garcia singled to left to score Carter and take a 2-0 lead there in the first inning. And then that kind of held serve until the top of the third. The Rangers, or Nathan Eovaldi was out there, and Corbin Carroll, or you got singles from Alec Thomas and Evan Longoria. Corbin Carroll then tripled to score both of them. Ketel Marte grounded into a fielder's choice. Corbin Carroll scored there. So basically, gave the Diamondbacks a 3-2 lead there. And then bottom of the third, Mitch Garver got a bases loaded walk against Zach Gallen to tie the game again. Top of the fourth, Tommy Pham hit a homer off Nathan Eovaldi to give the Diamondbacks a 4-3 lead. And then in the top of the fifth, Ketel Marte doubled to center field to score Geraldo Perdomo. And then it basically held like that, which was a 5-3 lead Arizona until the bottom of the ninth when Seager hit a 2-run homer off Paul Sewald, the Arizona closer, to tie the game at 5 and send this game to extra innings. And then we went until the bottom of the 11th when Adolis Garcia hit a walk-off homer off Miguel Castro. Was one of those kind of classic games that Matt was talking about here, to give the a 6-5 win and a 1-game lead in the World Series. So, first of all, what were you guys' thoughts on Game One as a whole? We'll go ahead and start with Matt.
Yeah, it was a really good game. One of the probably the best. Well, I say probably. It was definitely the best game of this World Series. I mean, you had the pitching matchup was great between Gallen and Evaldi. You know, Gallen ended up hanging in there after a kind of tough start, and you know, the Diamondbacks were the first team that really got to Evaldi in the postseason in like forever. So that was definitely an interesting thing to watch. And then you know, there's the whole ninth inning. I mean, Corey Seager is like the perfect type of hitter to face Paul Sewald. Sewald throws that high fastball with spin rates, but it's with high spin rates, but it's not elite velocity. And Corey Seager's one of those guys who has the swing that can get on top of that pitch. So you know when you're facing not an elite velocity when you're Corey Seager, that's just a really tough matchup for Sewald, and it ended up being the home run. I think the big thing that got that got to me about that one was the walk. I think he walked Tavares to lead off the inning, and you know, if you don't walk Tavares, well, that home run makes it a one-run game. And then, of course, you know, at some point you knew that somebody was going to break through, and of course, Adolis Garcia was the guy. He had been the hero in the ALCS, and he became a hero in the World Series in Game One. And you know, it just that felt like such a big win for the Rangers because coming into this series, it felt like the Diamondbacks had to win all the close games because of the quality of their bullpen had been pitching with so far this postseason. Whereas like the Rangers were probably going to just explode a couple times for a bunch of runs, and you know that the Diamondbacks kind of had to live on the margins to win this series, and that Game One was really an example of how they didn't, and they weren't able to you know, to take advantage of having a two-run lead in the ninth inning. So definitely an interesting game, a lot of fun. I was definitely entertained by Game One. It was a wild one for sure.
Yeah, watching that those last couple of innings there in extras, once Corey Seager came up, you felt like as soon as Corey Seager unloads that home run, that was a not only was it a monster home run, but Corey Seager was doing, jumping around and yelling and doing kind of a celebration, a pimp job almost. And Corey Seager doesn't do pimp jobs, right? He's not a guy getting typically emotional for home runs. He's pretty stoic. But for him to go in there and start jumping around and get emotional and stuff, that kind of told me that this Rangers team, that if they can win this game after they've tied it in the ninth, I feel like they're not going to lose the World Series. Um, and Adolis Garcia being the guy to go ahead and walk it off was just so textbook. I mean, once he came up, I was like, he's probably just going to end it right here. And the swing he put on the ball to get the home run he was late on it, right? He hit it to right field as a right-handed hitter, and initially I was like, well, that might get off the wall, and it kind of carried out, and it almost felt like a kind of a gremlin exercise from David Freese hitting a walk-off triple against the Rangers in 2011. So, that was obviously a game six, maybe a more pivotal moment, but this one, gets out, ends game one, gives the Rangers that 1-0 lead at home. And it was the biggest moment of the series, and probably the biggest moment of the whole playoffs was this game one. I felt like this was kind of pointed the series in the Rangers' favor, and especially because they won that first pitching matchup, it all kind of went downhill for the Diamondbacks after game two, which we'll talk about right now.
Yeah, so we mentioned game one. Rangers get that walk-off victory at home, come back the next day again at home, feeling really high of themselves, thinking we have a chance to take a real commanding lead of this World Series before heading to Arizona. And we got Jordan Montgomery versus Merrill Kelly, another kind of really good pitching duel I think we would have expected as well. And was living up to the billing through 3 innings. It was tied 0-0. And then top of the fourth, Gabriel Moreno hit a homer off of Jordan Montgomery, and then Tommy Pham doubled, and Lourdes Gurriel singled him home. So Diamondbacks took a 2-0 lead there. And then in the bottom of the fifth, Mitch Garver hit a homer off of Merrill Kelly to make it a 2-1 Diamondbacks lead. It was kind of a close game all the way until the top of the seventh there, and then Evan Longoria singled home Alec Thomas, and then Corbin Carroll singled home Longoria. So the Diamondbacks then jumped up to a 4-1 lead. And then the top of the eighth is kind of where it all kind of got out of hand here. You got a bases loaded single from Ketel Marte that scored 2, and then Corbin Carroll singled as well to score 2 more. So that, or 2 more? No, one more. So it made it a 7-1 lead, and then in the at the top of the ninth, Emmanuel Rivera singled and scored two more there to give the Diamondbacks a 9-1 lead, 9-1 lead, and they shut down the bottom of the ninth really easy. And I think the real performance of game two that needs to be talked about a lot was the pitching performance Merrill Kelly was putting on. I mean, 7 innings, he had 9 strikeouts. I think he was only at like 94 pitches too. He really even wanted to stay in the game. And Torey Lovullo still pulled him because they had such a big lead there. But, it felt like all the momentum was with the Rangers after game one. And then Arizona comes back and just swipes all that right back away in game two in Texas before heading to Arizona to tie the series up. So, David, what were your feelings on game two?
Yeah, really good performance by Merrill Kelly, right? I mean, he and Jordan Montgomery were kind of going toe to toe for a while, and it felt like another one of those close games. And once the Rangers bullpen got invoked, the game got broken wide open, and I thought that could be a sticking point for the Rangers, but looking back, it felt like almost a hangover after the game one celebration where, okay, well, we can lose. It was kind of a reality check for the Rangers' road here. It was like we're gonna we're gonna take this. It wasn't like we're gonna take this one off, but we can afford to lose one. But we're gonna get back to business next time. Um, Merrill Kelly really did throw a really strong game, and obviously the Diamondbacks bats got going in the later in the game. So um, I wasn't surprised that the Diamondbacks pulled one out, but I was surprised that it got to be such a large lead to where there was no chance of a comeback late. But yeah, I mean, this was kind of the point at which it was like the Rangers either put up or shut up here. If game three comes out and the Rangers lose, then I felt like the Diamondbacks would have all the momentum and take it the rest of the way. It was kind of at this point where it was almost like I don't know if this series is going to go the full distance. I kind of feel like it's going to end early because you have two teams playing at the top of their game when they're locked in. But there would seem to be some stretches where both of them had, long periods where they were just not, hitting and not going quite the same as they had in the previous series.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I echo that pretty much from David. I think Merrill Kelly was really the story in this game. He's been a really solid major league pitcher for a while now, but his postseason performance this year, especially in the championship series against the Phillies, and then the World Series here against the Rangers was awesome, and hopefully it's something for him to build off of going into next year. And the thing about the Rangers with their bullpen too is that I think they had some pieces that were volatile, but could be good in the back end of their bullpen. Guys like Chapman and Leclerc and those types. Josh Spores, those are just some guys who are volatile but can be good. Um, and but once you got past those guys, you got guys who were volatile and not never good. Like you just and they ended up having to throw out a couple of guys like Brock Burke and um, I think that's probably hurt them in this game. Chris Stratton didn't do well in this game. Will Smith, even though Will Smith apparently is the savior the of every team winning the World Series because it's 3 years in a row for him. But I think this was definitely a game that the Diamondbacks you felt pretty good about them splitting the first two. The pitching matchups were pretty even in those first two games, and you split them playing on the road. You go home. You've got a pitcher in Brandon Pfaadt who's been hot lately in the postseason. Going against the Max Scherzer who's dealt with so many injuries, and then you bullpen versus bullpen games. You feel like the bullpen game probably does favor the Diamondbacks a little bit. So you felt like game three and four, you might have a tiny advantage in that pitching matchup. So you felt pretty good about taking 1 out of 2 in Texas if you're Arizona, and but as we'll see going back home, what ended up not going very well for them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you would have said that that game three with the pitching matchup of Max Scherzer versus Brandon Pfaadt would be the best pitched game through the series by either team, I think you might have. A lot of people wouldn't have had that. So we had Matt mentioned it was going to be Max Scherzer versus Brandon Pfaadt there. top of the third's kind of when things got started. Marcus Simeon hit a single that scored Nate Lowe, and then Corey Seager hit another homer, which that'll be a common theme you'll hear here, to give the Rangers 3-0 lead early on. Max Scherzer was pitching pretty. He was better than he had been in the playoffs so far, and then after I think it was coming out for the fourth inning, he had a lat injury, I guess, that really, or a back injury that really stiffened up on him. So he had to get pulled from the game. So John Gray came in. John Gray gave them 3 scoreless innings as well. Um, and Arizona didn't score until the bottom of the eighth off of Aroldis Chapman. They got a single by Geraldo Perdomo to score Manuel Rivera, but that was all the offense that Arizona could muster was the one run there. So Texas ended up winning that game 3-1. Um, and taking the 2-1 lead in the World Series there. I if you had to pick a story for this game, which I don't know what it would be if it was Max Scherzer's injury, John Gray stepping up, Corey Seager hitting his homer, but I mean there was a lot of different kind of stories there. I guess the biggest story might have been that Adolis Garcia got hurt right in the top of the ninth there, the last batter. With an oblique injury that ended up ending his World Series too. But what were your overall thoughts and like what was your big takeaway from Game 3 here, Matt?
So my big takeaway here was I think it was just, and it ended up being a theme for the last 3 games of this series. The Diamondbacks seemed to get a lot of base runners, and they just couldn't break through. I know that in the eighth inning they had Chapman on the ropes. They had first and third, one out, double play ball. I mean that seemed to be the case for them in all 3 of their home games. Just they could not quite break through for a big inning. And part of that's just kind of the theme of the postseason. People talk a lot about, oh, we got to make more contact in the postseason. You got to put the ball in play. The teams that are big power teams aren't going to be very good. Well, when you start having to string together 5, 6 hits in a row to score a couple runs, that's very tough to do off these postseason pitchers. And you kind of saw that in this series where the Diamondbacks kept getting 2 or 3 guys on base and having the bases loaded, especially in game 5, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but some in this game too, where, they just kept getting guys on base and couldn't break through. And, whereas the Rangers could get a Corey Seager home run and then boom, that's all they needed, so, um, I think that was kind of a big deal in this game. I do want to shout out John Gray. This is a guy who has spent a lot of time injured this year, and just his tenure in Texas so far had been kind of volatile. He came up huge in the postseason in relief. I thought he was awesome. Um, this is a guy who has elite stuff. He had been stuck in Colorado for a while. It was an interesting signing when he went to Texas before last season. Hadn't worked out throughout the regular seasons, but you got a guy with his kind of talent, throw him in the bullpen. That's one thing you can kind of look at in the postseason too. With these teams that struggle in the bullpen, they can move a guy like John Gray, who they needed as a starter in the regular season, but now they don't need a fifth starter. So move him to the bullpen and see what he can do. And he did really well for them in this game. Probably saved the day, and then they were able to close it out in the ninth inning. It did suck to see Adolis Garcia get hurt and Max Scherzer get hurt. Both of those guys ended up going out. And luckily for the Rangers, it ended up not mattering, and especially with the Scherzer thing, he probably would have been the starter for Game 7 if they had gotten there. So, um, who knows what would have happened there? But Adolis going out hurt them a lot, and but yeah, I mean, it ended up, this was an entertaining game. I thought, the Diamondbacks kept putting themselves in position to have chances to come back, and they just never broke through.
This is going to be a recurring theme on my end, but I do want to make note of Jose Leclerc and Josh Sabors, 2 of the big 3 guys for the Rangers that have just been dominant all playoffs. One hit between them allowed for the last 2 innings. Or actually, I guess Sabors was the seventh, and Leclerc was the ninth. Chapman obviously giving up in the eighth, but this game almost made Bruce Bochy kind of switch it, and I think Chapman comes in the seventh later in the series, so you can kind of point to this and say, when Chapman came in and gave up a run in the eighth, they kind of moved Sabors up their circle of trust, and I think that was the right move. And what you'll see, in the next couple of games is the Diamondbacks really don't have anything for Sabors or Leclerc, so this is going to be difficult thing for the Diamondbacks to overcome is this back end of the bullpen when they're down a run or two and they need something. Leclerc and Sabors are dominant, and they really didn't have anything for them once once we got to these final last couple of games.
Yeah, so the Rangers there took the 2-1 lead, and then game 4, you mentioned it was Andrew Heaney was taking the ball for Texas, and Arizona went with a true bullpen game, going ahead and starting Joe Mantiply. Worked out for Texas, especially. Heaney was able to go 5 innings there, give up 1 run. Mantiply went an inning in the third, gave up 1 run, but really at the top of the seconds where everything just went downhill for Arizona. Leody Taveras was able to score on a wild pitch, and then Marcus Simeon was tripled and scored. What was that 3, 2, 2? I think it was 2.
Two, yeah.
He scored 2, and then Seager hit another homer to score Simeon and himself, so that made it 5-0 in the top of the second. And then top of the third, Travis Jankowski doubled to score some, and then Marcus Simeon hit another homer, and basically that allowed Texas to score 5 more in the third inning to give them a 10-0 lead. And from that point, it was really just over. Arizona was able to get one back in the bottom of the fourth with a sac fly from Lourdes Gurriel, and then in the top of the eighth, Jonah Heim hit a homer to make it an 11-1 game. And then, Arizona still fought through the bottom of the eighth. They were able to score some on a Tommy Pham lineout, and then a home run by Lourdes Gurriel to make it 11-5. And then they got one back in the bottom of the ninth off Jose Leclerc there, Gabriel Marengo single, to make it an 11-7 game for Arizona, or Arizona losing at home again to Texas there. So this game, Arizona the bullpen really just didn't give them what they needed here. Going with the true bullpen game there. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But this Texas offense was just having no part of that and just basically took the momentum from them right away. Arizona did fight till late, but overall, David, what do you think of this game?
Yeah, this one was over real quick. And the 11-7 final score doesn't tell you the story of this one because at 11-1, there was a lot of breathing room for the
Yeah.
Rangers in this game. And, shout out to Travis Jankowski, came up as the Adolis Garcia replacement, gets 2 hits, 2 RBI, strong game. Really, good for him to have a good World Series performance. And then Marcus Simeon, 5 RBI, showed up finally. We talked about it in the preview show. He would show up eventually, right? He's a big time player, and he came out here in Game 3, really solidified things. And the final shout out is obviously Andrew Heaney. 5 innings made it not a bullpen game for the Rangers, which allows them to go to some of those arms that are a lot less reliable. They do have to go to Jose Leclerc in this game, which does not change the outcome of Game 5, and ultimately keeps them in contention. But I think this is a referendum against bullpen games. It's just you got to have a starting pitcher. The problem with the Diamondbacks was they've been able to get away with it, right? And it bites them here and gives the Rangers that 3-1 lead that it's a little dreaded, but everybody was able to. Everybody knows the Indians lost the 3-1 lead in 2016, so um, the Rangers do not do that here, and I think it's pretty clear as to why this team just felt very complete all postseason long, and they didn't let that 3-1 pressure get to them.
Yeah, I thought this game was definitely just kind of like you said. I think the with the Diamondbacks, their bullpen had some really good pieces at the back end, and Ginkel and Seawald and Ryan Thompson had pitched really well in the postseason, but that depth in that bullpen wasn't quite there this year. You had Frias, and you had Castro, and you had um, man to plot like they had some moments where they were good, but they just wasn't a very deep bullpen. So if you could get your starter through 6 or 7 innings, like what happened in games, really the games that the Diamondbacks were able to hold the Rangers down a bit, you could get to the back end, and you felt pretty good about your relievers. But once you started getting in the middle of that bullpen. It just wasn't super deep, and I think you saw that in this game. And if you're the Rangers, I mean, you can't blow that lead to the point of having to give the other team another look at your closer in that game. I feel like that was really rough on them to give up enough runs. I was asleep. I went to bed when it was like 11-1.
Hmm.
So, but I woke up the next morning and it was 11-7, and I was like, really? And but you can't let that get to your closer. So that was kind of a rough thing, but it ended up not mattering at the end of the day, and definitely a bludgeoning in that game, and put the pressure on the Diamondbacks to have to win. Um, and sometimes that pressure can really mount up on a young team like that. So definitely a big one for the Rangers there.
Yeah, so then let's move over to Game Five, which ended up being the closing game here. We got the Nathan Eovaldi versus Zach Gallen matchup again, and it really lived up to the hype this time. Eovaldi went 6 innings scoreless, 4 hits, five. He had some walks, 5 walks, 5 strikeouts. Story I think of this game a lot was really Zach Gallen. I mean, he had 6 no-hit innings through this. Got put back out there for this seventh. And you could tell he was kind of a little bit gassed at that point. Gave up a leadoff single to Corey Seager. Evan Carter doubled right away, and then Mitch Garver singled both of them home, or sorry, only singled Sinker home to give them a 1-0 lead there. And then they pulled him, and it was a really close, 1-run game all the way until the top of the ninth. Arizona brought in Paul Sewald in the down 1 run there in the ninth, try and get it to the bottom of the ninth in a close game. And Sewald gave up a single to Josh Jung, a single to Nate Lowe. Jonah Heim then singled both of them home, and Heim went to third on an error. And then I think that was Alec Thomas. The ball went under his glove or something. And then Marcus Semien hit a homer off of Sewald to score Heim and himself. That really gave them the 4 runs there and a 5-run lead in the ninth inning, to really kind of put that final dagger there in Arizona, and give Texas the 5-0 lead, or the 5-0 win, I should say, to clinch their first ever World Series as a franchise. So, Matt, what was your takeaway of Game 5 and kind of just the overall World Series for Texas?
Yeah. So game five, I thought that it was a really entertaining game. Compared to some of the others, it was a game that the Diamondbacks had so many opportunities to score runs early, and they just kept getting. I mean, I don't know how Evaldi kept getting out of them, and you could tell every time they didn't score that the pressure was just starting to mount more and more and more, and they were struggling with runners in scoring position. And I think runners in scoring position stats aren't really the tell all end all be all. They're not super well predictive, but there are times where it can get in your head if you're paying attention to it and you're not. Um, and I think that really happened with them. I think they started taking bad at bats with runners in on base, and like I mentioned earlier, I mean, they don't have a guy who can just get that home run and get that run that way. Like they have to string together these hits, and sometimes it's difficult against a guy like Eovaldi, especially when he's wild, to string together 2 or 3 hits, even if you get a walk here and there. So Gallen was awesome. It was the Zach Gallen that we hadn't really seen that much of in the playoffs, but man, he looked like the Cy Young contender Zach Gallen we saw in the regular season, and that was fun to see. And I mean, I feel like the Diamondbacks maybe felt like they had to leave him in there when maybe he could have come out, just because of the way that the bullpen had performed in the previous couple of games. They felt like the third time through, Zach Gallen was probably still better than, that seventh inning guy, like whether it was going to be Ryan Thompson or Saul Frank or somebody. And it ended up not working out for him. But at the end of the day, if you don't score any runs, I mean, Zach Gallen only gave up one. So if you don't score any runs, then it's going to be hard to win the game. And I think, yeah, and then the Rangers, of course, they were able to finish it off. Paul Sewald in the ninth inning, you know, I kind of feel like it would have been wise to get him out there in one of those other games. After game one, I think that was just I don't think he pitched between game one and game five,
Yep.
and it feels like just from a confidence standpoint, they needed to get him back out there and shake off that home run to Corey Seager. Before he gets put into a game that's like he has to come in and not give up a run, because
Hmm.
it just seems like his confidence was shot in game five, and he struggled. And the Rangers pulled away and made it easy on their bullpen in the ninth inning, and that was it. And congrats to the Rangers, their first championship. They had the heartbreak in 2011 against the Cardinals, and the game David talked about earlier with the Nelson Cruz missing the fly ball to right field that just barely went over his head, and then David Freese hitting the walk off homer, and in game six when the Rangers were down to a strike away like three times and couldn't get it done. And, good for them. And I do think there's been a lot of talk in this postseason about the champion not being deserving. And I feel like that probably would have been the case with the Diamondbacks. But the Rangers were a really quality team this year. They had a few stretches where they had some injuries and stuff. But, I mean, they had the second best run differential in the American League. And they had probably the second best offense in baseball, maybe the third best behind the Dodgers and the Braves in the regular season. They were really, really, really good this year. So that was a well built team, and they definitely deserved to be in the playoffs. They had a better run differential than the Orioles, who won 101 games. So they were a very quality team, and congrats to them. I think it was a great season for them, and we'll see if they can build off of it. They got a lot of pieces coming back, in the next couple of years that, maybe you get to see Jacob DeGrom. He's got his ring. Maybe you get to see him healthy again late next year, and um, this team could be here to stay for a few years.
It absolutely could, yeah. I do want to note that Josh Sabors through 2 1/3 innings. That's 7 outs. 4 outs of those were strikeouts. Only allowed one hit to
Yeah,
close out the Diamondbacks. Just a dominant bullpen performance there. The Diamondbacks did get to a Aroldis Chapman, walked, ended up with some guys on base against him. It was kind of one of those things where all game they were kind of tantalizingly close, and um, ultimately they don't score, and the Rangers the ones who push some runs across late. I also want to note that in this World Series, Corey Seager hit as many home runs as all of the Diamondbacks together. Seager hit the three, and then the Diamondbacks whole team hit three with one each for Gurriel, Moreno, and Pham. And then one story that came out of this was that Tommy Pham was looking to be the first 5 for 5 game in the game the Diamondbacks won.
oh yeah,
He was looking to be the first 5 for 5 game, and Torey Lovullo pinch hit for him. I think Jace Peterson was the one who pinch hit. Jake got
yeah.
traded to the Diamondbacks, and everyone was kind of like, "What the hell? No one's ever hit 5 for 5 in the World Series." And Tommy Pham revealed later that he asked for Lovullo to get Jace Peterson a plate appearance in the World Series, which is a pretty cool move, I think. So Tommy Pham, not known for those cool moves, but definitely something positive to come out of this World Series. And I think Matt hit the nail on the head with regards to the Rangers. That's a team that was really deserving all season. We talked about them a lot. They made a lot of moves. They've spent a lot of money. They've promoted prospects aggressively. Evan Carter wasn't really a factor in this World Series, but he and Josh Jung both, and really Jonah Heim, all young guys who got an opportunity to start, got an opportunity to play and play well, and were able to succeed on the big stage. So there's still going to be some growing pains. I think, especially with Evan Carter, he was really not great in the World Series. But you know what? It's
Well,
for a 21-year-old kid already having a World Series ring and having this kind of experience, I think it can only be good for his career going forward. So, yeah, I think that kind of about wraps it up. This was a somewhat underwhelming World Series, a somewhat underwhelming playoffs, but I think we got the right champion out of it all. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the season. I'm excited for the off season now.
Yeah, it was to see Texas finally be able to close it out after the heartbreak that they've had
Hmm.
their previous trips there. That was really cool. And then it was really cool to see guys like Seager and Andrew Heaney and Scherzer and even Jacob DeGrom, who like wasn't able to play here, but like he's now a World Series champion.
Hmm.
So that's really cool as
And
well.
and I was gonna say with Jacob DeGrom, and I think you can say this about some of these guys over the past few years that got injured. Like Jacob DeGrom was a huge part of this because if he didn't pitch really well for the first 2 months of the season before he got hurt, they would not have made the playoffs.
Hmm.
So you got to
Yeah,
remember guys like that because him and um, somebody else on this team got hurt early that didn't play again either. I mean
Gray,
it
really.
was it was definitely like it's one of those things where like they do not make the playoffs. I mean they made the playoffs by one game over the Mariners. So
Hmm.
without Jacob DeGrom pitching well, it's this World Series doesn't happen.
yeah. So that was really cool to see. But overall, as a season, I mean, it was a pretty good season. It was interesting to see the implementations of the new rules and the pitch clock. I think we saw, I don't know how the stacks back to back it up, but I think we saw a slight uptick in pitching injuries this year. So I hope that they're able to figure out, and now having a full season under their belt of what it actually looks like going back, going into next season, able to figure out a better routine for all of themselves. Because I'm not sure we knew exactly what it was actually going to look like, and we all were playing with it for a while of the tempos of when it was supposed to be and when the clock starts and stuff. And so now they actually got that. We'll see. I don't think much of the other rules really affected anything. I mean, the bigger bases, you saw more successful stolen bases. I think that's just exactly what we wanted to see. But overall, the season, I thought it was really good. I think we might have saw a slight uptick in injuries, but other than that, it was good.
Yeah, the stolen bases thing was nice, right? Ronald Acuna getting to 70, just that being a more integral part of the game of baseball. It's always fresh. It's always nice to see that. And then, I mean, I think the changes were really, really good. Like you said, I do hope there's nothing wrong with the injuries, but again, I think that'll level out as pitchers get used to the the pitch clock. A lot of guys are coming up with the pitch clock now, and so a lot of the younger pitchers are utilizing this tempo and utilizing their bodies right. And I think it'll overall get better on that front. But for a pace wise, it was very nice. You didn't really notice it, and honestly, it was nice to have no ghost runner in extra innings in the playoffs. And I really wish that would just come back to the regular season.
Yeah, I echo what both of y'all said. It was a good season. Some historic things this year, some really fun games, fun teams to watch. I think that like you said, the big story definitely the rule changes coming into the year. And I mean I never really noticed the shift ban all that much, honestly. Like if you're just watching the game, guys, I think it was a good balance of teams still being able to shift and play in a way that they or have strategy involved, but not, but still not have them really far out of position and stuff. So I think that worked out well how they had that rule set up this year. I thought that the pitch clock was really good, and you mentioned the injuries, and a lot of that's just year to year variance too. And
Mhm.
honestly, injuries are going to keep going up as long as pitchers start keep throwing at the rates that they're, throwing as hard as they are, and even harder and harder and harder, throw more breaking balls. I mean, that's all. That's not necessarily a trend that's new. Pitching injuries increasing, and I know there's some guys that probably needed to get used to the pitch clock a little bit, but I think that that's definitely something. And the stolen base, I think we could use a little bit more balance because it is so difficult to hold runners now. But we could use a tiny bit more balance. But I think it's better to have too many stolen bases than not enough stolen bases. Maybe one extra pickoff move might help or something. I don't really know, but um, I definitely think that was something that was good for the game in general. I think they could maybe tone it down a tiny bit and make it a little bit more fair. But I thought that this was a really fun season, and the playoffs were entertaining. You had two games. The World Series wasn't the best World Series ever, but you had two game sevens in the championship series, which was really fun to see. Um, and I'm excited to see what happens in the off season and going into next year. Ready to dive into that here. I'm sure we'll do that Tuesday. So.
Yeah, so look out on Tuesday. We're going to have our free agent predictions. I don't know quite how many we're going to have yet or who we're going to have, but we'll have a lot of the big names at least. So be on the lookout for that. And then awards week, I believe, is next week as well. So we'll break that down on the 14th. Um, and just if you guys don't know now, we are live streaming the episodes on YouTube. So if you aren't subscribed there, go subscribe, like it. You want it as we're recording it, you can get there. If you're listening to on the podcast side, if you're listening to the YouTube side, make sure to go subscribe on the podcast side for us too. So that'll wrap up this episode of the Batflip Podcast. Thanks to you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys back next week for free agent predictions.